Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. This will be a little bit different, not really going through one specific church father, but I'm actually going to be doing a summary of the Council of Ephesus, which was a council. Look, I'll share my screen here. So these are some notes that I was taking when I was reading through the Acts of the Council. So basically, the Council of Ephesus was a council in 431 AD called by Emperor Theodosius. The Pope at the time was Pope Celestine, and the council was basically called to address an issue. Look, I'll go full screen. To address an issue called Nestorianism, which Nestorianism, people often misquote or misrepresent Nestorius in his view. Nestorius thought there were two natures in Christ and one person. This is why he said. But for some reason, he called the human nature of Christ, he called it like Christ, and he called the divine nature of Christ the Son of God. I think. This has been a while since I read this book. And essentially, he said Christ, when he said Christ died on the cross, he was then referring to the human nature, since he says the human nature is called Christ, and the divine nature is called the Son of God. When he said Christ died on the cross, he thinks the human nature died on the cross. Which then brings an issue, because then you're saying that the human nature can receive and act apart from the divine nature. So now, when the Christ, according to him, Christ died on the cross, the divine nature was just chilling there apparently, and now according to him, now there's two centers of activity. Now the human nature can act and receive action, such as die, and the divine nature can as well. So now you've made two subjects, two principles of action, which is essentially two persons, because there's two principles of action, so that means there's two persons acting. It's very simple. But Nestorianism, he did not say there were two persons, but his theology led to two persons, because he said stupid things like Christ cannot have been a child, it's crazy to say God died, and stuff like that. So, boom. Cyril of Alexandria was the person who led the council, which was the guy at the time, the main guy, patriarch of Alexandria. Nestorius was the patriarch of Constantinople. John of Antioch came there, yada, yada, yada. So, how did it start? Essentially, it started because there were some guys that were attacking the term Theotokos, which means God-bearer, and they were calling Mary the Christotokos, which means Christ-bearer. So both of these terms are correct, but the problem is if you deny one of them, it's very serious. When the guys were denying Theotokos, meaning God-bearer, they were denying that Mary gave birth to God, namely Christ, because Christ is God. Yeah, because once again, they thought that if you're saying God-bearer, they thought that means Mary is giving birth to the divine nature, because they put names on divine nature on natures for some reason. But rather, when we say God, Christ is God, we're referring to the person of full screen. We're referring to the person of Christ through his divine nature, since he has two natures. Or if he has one composite nature, it's the same kind of like. Yeah. He has one. I'm gonna just say two natures because I'm not Oriental Orthodox. So he has two natures. So when you're referring Christ is God, you're referring through his divine nature. He is God. He is God, not the divine nature. He is God. Yeah. When you say Christ is man, you're referring to Christ through his human nature. You get it? So when those guys were saying that you can't say Mary is Theotokos, they were basically making the error that and they were attributing God to the divine nature. But you can't really attribute names to natures. You attribute them to subjects. Error from them. Nestorius, confusing the natures of Christ, etc., etc. So as I was saying, so some guy went and said, yo, don't call Mary Theotokos. And then this guy, Proclus of Constantinople, which he was just like a bishop at the time, but he became archbishop after Nestorius. Two bishops after Nestorius, and then he defended Theotokos, And Nestorius was in the crowd. Nestorius was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Nestorius is such a bum, man. Nestorius, what the hell are you talking about? And then Nestorius started going against them. And then Cyril of Alexandria said, and then there was a whole, like, basically from that one sermon where Nestorius was in the crowd. And then it started the letters. So Cyril sent his first letter to the monks, and he warns against Nestorius's actions. And then he sent to Acacius, or however you say it. And he tried to, it was like, it's very like political. He was trying to win guys over because, yeah, but he failed to win over the Syrian bishops, and they were heavily for Nestorius. And then after a couple of letters, then he directly sends a letter to Nestorius. And yeah, and he affirms a hypostatic union. So Nestorius wanted a conjunction, or like it was like a looser unity. I wouldn't even say like, I think he said unity of dignity at one point. But Cyril wanted a very tight hypostatic union. And then very short after, he made the 12 anathemas, which would become very controversial. But I won't say it in this video because that's not really what it's about. But yeah, this is like Cyril's like final thing, and he's like, "Yo, you man are bums if you don't follow this one, man." But guys were saying that it was too much. Guys like Theodoret of Cyrus, who is also a very big figure, were saying, "Yo, why are you doing too much, man? Now you're going a bit too much." You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you were correct when you were arguing against Nestorius, but now you're going a bit too far. And then they call for a little smaller council. Celestine actually anathematizes Nestorius, but yeah, this is I won't talk about it here. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna say it. And then Theodosius, because empirical rule, the guys have to call the council, the emperors have to call the council. So he calls the council to resolve the issue, and you have a bunch of people coming. This is like the biggest council. Actually, no, Chalcedon is bigger. So you have Cyril and Memnon, who was the bishop of Ephesus. He was the host, and you have 150 plus bishops. And the Antiochians, John of Antioch, Theodoret, they came late. Okay, this was a big problem, and there were also the Roman legates, who were the guys who represent Rome. They came late, but they obviously sided with Cyril. But there was a problem. John of Antioch arrived late. So he arrived late by like hella days, bro. I think it was like 30 days or something. And Cyril was outraged. Cyril acted wrongly. Everybody can agree Cyril acted wrongly. And he started the council without John of Antioch. Okay? And then Nestorius just refused to attend like a bum, bro. So Cyril's council. So they had a little one-day debate or whatever. And he deposes Nestorius, I guess. This wasn't really the main council, though. It was just like a whatever council. I think, bro, it's been so long since I read up on this. And John of Antioch, he was furious that they started without him, so he holds a rival council. And he deposes Cyril and Memnon, okay? And now this is very confusing now, because you got Cyril's council, anathemad John of Antioch and Nestorius and all them. And then John of Antioch's council deposed Cyril and Memnon, okay? And yeah, so whoever the emperor agrees with has the right of say. So Theodosius leans towards John of Antioch, deposing Cyril and Memnon. Okay, so he actually deposes all three, and he ordered bishops to stay in Ephesus for negotiation. What Cyril actually does is he bribes the court individuals. He threatens Alexandria's grain supply, and then monastic mobs also riot in the capital demanding Cyril's restoration. And also, this was the main reason Cyril won this council, because the emperor was theologically, he was leaning towards John of Antioch, is because everybody agreed Nestorius was deposed. Okay. So the emperor agreed Nestorius was deposed, but John of Antioch didn't agree that Nestorius was deposed. And they needed a successor to Nestorius. Okay? But the only people who were going to give a successor were the Cyrillian side, Cyril of Alexandria and Memnon. Okay, because John of Antioch, they still recognized Nestorius, but the emperor didn't. So now there's like a stalemate. Okay, I'll repeat it one more time. I'll go full screen. Nestorius is deposed. Okay, according to the emperor. John of Antioch doesn't think Nestorius is deposed. Okay, but the emperor needs a successor to Nestorius. Since these guys think Nestorius is still like valid, they don't give a successor. But Cyril, who the emperor deposed, are willing to give a successor. So, what they do is they use this leverage, okay, and they say, okay, we will give you a successor to Nestorius if you restore Cyril and Memnon. Oh, they're geniuses. And Theodosius had no choice. He had no choice because he needed a successor. Those guys weren't giving him because they recognized Nestorius, but these guys were giving. So he said, okay, we will give you. I will take your successor, which was Maximian. And yeah, Maximian. So he allowed the Cyrillian allies to consecrate Maximian, and in exchange, Cyril and Memnon are reinstated. And Theodosius issues a decree. He accepts Cyril's counsel and ignores John's counsel because of this act of Maximian's thing. It's a very interesting council, and it was a lot of politics, especially with how the Cyrillian side won, because Cyril was doing bribes, man. Trust me, Cyril was doing bribes, but it was smart because they did win the council that way, to be honest. Even though, like, everybody would agree that Cyril's theology is correct, it all depended upon the imperial the statement of the emperor, who was siding with the Antiochians. So Cyril did the right thing. He did what he had to do, and then boom, legitimized the Theotokos. The Council of Ephesus 431 was deemed ecumenical, authoritative, and John of Antioch was in the bin. But maybe I'll do a different video on the formula of reunion, which was in 433, and how Cyril of Alexandria actually reunited with these guys, with John of Antioch, and all those guys. So yeah, but this is a quick summary on the Council of Ephesus. I read like a 700-page book, and I just gave it to you in 12 minutes. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you, man, in the next one.